Hello, you're very welcome along to the Matchbook Champions League podcast. We have a massive weekend of quarterfinal action coming up this week. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, joined by a full complement of a team of Mark O'Hare, Adrian, Clarke, and Miguel Delaney. We were catching a little bit off air on a lot of the stuff that happened over the weekend in review, but we are focused this week on the 4 Champions League ties. And we'll get straight into it because we want to fly through this as we are recording on Tuesday morning. We start with Manchester City versus Bayern Munich. It's Tuesday night game. Miguel will be there. We'll go to you first, Miguel. Once we take a look at the betting that we have at matchbook.com, you can back Manchester City 1.69, Bayern Munich 5.6. The draw is 4.3. Both teams to score yes is 1.7. No's available at 2.8 or 2.28. Sorry. The Asian handicap line sees Bayern Munich get a 3/4 of a goal head start at 2.12. And the goal line is set for this match at 3.0. So, yeah, Miguel, you'll be there for all 2 legs. Set up this game from us from a Pep Guardiola point of view because we speak a lot about this Pep Guardiola overthinking. You mentioned at the start of the season about maybe dropping Haaland for a game. I thought no chance. And right now, you'd be nearly surprised if he started Haaland over Alvarez the last couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost the worst thing. Or the worst thing that could happen to Guardiola and City in the circumstances. Now, those circumstances, though, are, of course, where they're looking as good as they have been in the Champions League ever. I mean, it's almost as if everything had been going right for them. They're suddenly in exceptional form, kind of Champions League winning form, and it feels that's connected to the way Guardiola conditions the team. He always has them peaking. This goes right back to his time at Barcelona. We have them peaking for March, April for the Champions League knockouts. It felt like, even though they were on the more difficult side of the draw, they were on the they were the better side, the one with the least problems. Madrid initially second in the league didn't look as strong, although already the 4-0 win over Barcelona and Benzema's ominous return to form changes. As we'll get to that. Chelsea in disarray, and Bayern, although they had maybe the most adept, there was that fragility it felt like they had because of Nagelsmann. Except now. And even allowing, of course, for the fact that the other element to this, as you mentioned, that they've got Haaland. Now, Nagelsmann's gone, and who's in his place? Well, not just any manager, but someone I suppose you might call, maybe not the Guardiola whisperer, but the Guardiola silencer. It felt like everything was built up similarly in 2020-21, that Guardiola was finally going to have his moment to build up to that Porto final as if it was almost a sure thing. But Tuchel beat him for the 3rd time in a row. And that is suddenly the big... I think it sends this game into pretty much 50-50. I actually think the only big question about it is we know pretty much, even though allowing for questions about what Guardiola will do in terms of his formation, but we have a broad idea, as Tuchel alluded to in his press conference yesterday. But I think the biggest question is whether Tuchel can impose a kind of a solidity on Bayern that was so effective for Chelsea when they played City in that period, and kind of unlock City down in a way so many have struggled with lately. And it's very, very intriguing. I'm one of those where it's like, I think it'll be a very tight tie. That's the one thing we'll say. Tight in terms of it'll go very late before we have any inkling who's going through. I don't think it'll be even allowing for Haaland or whatever. I don't think it'll be one where City pull away. It's like Tuchel gives Bayern a new seriousness. I mean, one of the things that we'd heard was that one of the first things he did was basically, strip away a lot of Nagelsmann's self-indulgences that Guardiola's often been criticised of and make them more focused. That said, I don't think he has the sufficient opportunity to make them solid enough for this game. So I'm going both teams to score.
Okay, yeah, but Miguel thinks this tie in general will go down to the wire. Mark, pick up on Miguel's points just on that difference with Bayern Munich under Tuchel. We've only had a couple of games to look at that, but in general terms, Miguel touched on the head-to-head record with Chelsea and Manchester City that Tuchel always seemed to, get the better of Pep in those head-to-head games and those big games, and obviously the Champions League final is the one everyone thinks about.
Yeah, so I'm very much looking at this tie completely differently now, that it's Pep versus Tuchel rather than Pep versus Nagelsmann. I think when the draw was made first, really, really excited for this tie. I thought it could be a really explosive 2 legs. Now I'm not so sure it will be, because whilst Nagelsmann had shown he was capable of being pragmatic over the last 18 months, he'd matured a little bit as a head coach. He'd learned from his mistakes. He was, or he still is, much more of a kind of all guns blazing head coach compared to Thomas Tuchel, who is much more restrained, much more pragmatic when necessary. And I think, on paper, this could and should be a bit of a shoot 'em up, but I'm actually thinking, well, it's the first leg of a Champions League knockout tie, quarter-final between the top two in the outright market. There's going to be a huge amount of respect from both sides, both camps, both managers, both sets of players. And as you say, matches between these two head coaches tend to be quite competitive and tend to be quite close as well. So City-Chelsea is the obvious example. And 4 of their 5 meetings across all competitions ended 1-0. The only game to go over 2.5 goals in that 5-game sample was 2-1 to Chelsea, which included a stoppage time winner and came very immediately after basically Man City playing a Champions League knockout tie against PSG. So the large majority of matches here have been very closely contested, very low scoring. And I think that's all down to Thomas Tuchel rather than Pep Guardiola. So I was looking at this tie as a goals-heavy 2 legs originally. Now I'm actually looking at the under 3 goals, which is 1.85, or I think it's been clipped into 183 since I put my bet into the system. I'm not saying it won't be an enjoyable watch by any stretch, but I just think 4 goals or more is quite a hefty total to see this bet lose. And I think we're all expecting a bit more bang for our buck from PSG versus Bayern. Didn't really materialise. A lot of that was based on PSG's approach in the first leg. Of course it was. Also, Bayern chose control over chaos as well, which I thought was quite interesting. And that's certainly something that I think Pep will demand his players to try and control this tie, especially at the Etihad. I think Tuchel will allow City to have the ball, dominate possession, but he'll have a plan in place. He's a very crafty, very smart guy, and he's proven in the past he has got a bit of an Indian sign over Pep, and he's able to put together a plan in place to do some damage. And Choupo-Moting is banned for Bayern Munich as well. A lot of people might scoff at that and say it's a bit of a bonus, but actually he's probably the only central striker Bayern have. You're looking at probably Gnabry or Müller starting in the lead strikers role, and I do think that's to the detriment of Bayern. I do think they're at their best when they do have that focal point too. And I've forgotten the other point I was going to make, but no, it was on the match prices. City are now trading sub 1.7. That's extremely low. I think that's quite disrespectful actually to Bayern Munich, and you can get Bayern +1 at 1.83 now. I see on Matchbook, which is very appealing to me actually. City to win that game by 2 goals or more is the only way that bet loses. I think Bayern +1 and also under 3 goals is where I'd be heading here, because I give Bayern much more of an opportunity to progress now that Thomas Tuchel is in charge compared to Julian Nagelsmann. Yeah,
that money has come in this morning there. Billy in the YouTube comments kind of a bit surprised by it as well. Mark and Adrian, I think that's probably down to maybe the market saw something they liked from City over the weekend and maybe combining that with Tuchel only recently being a Bayern. But you are in agreement with Mark overall in the sense that it'll be
on
a great
everything
game,
he just said.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could have said all that myself. Yeah, and that pick there, because I looked at Bayern on a handicap and it wasn't as attractive as that when I looked yesterday. So yeah, I think Bayern +1 is a real live runner. I think the Tuchel factor will make this a lower scoring affair than it would have been had it been Nagelsmann. I would have expected it to be far more open and end to end. And Bayern have kept clean sheets, haven't they, against tough opposition this season? 2 clean sheets against PSG. They got one against Barca, against Inter Milan as well. That they've been able to control matches, whether that's with or without the ball, been able to keep teams at arm's length pretty well. And now they've got probably an even more astute, certainly defensive tactician in charge. You'd think they'd have a game plan up his sleeve. I mean, the wide men are a threat, aren't they? With Grealish and Mahrez, they're in great form at the moment, and they'll stay very, very wide. They might pin the fullbacks back for Bayern Munich, but I don't think that'll be an issue for Thomas Tuchel in this game, obviously with the second leg to come on home turf. So yeah, it's hard, isn't it, to pick a winner here? But I do see it being another Pep v Tuchel low scoring affair, 1-0 either way potentially, or a low scoring draw. That's how I'd see things panning out here. So yeah, it should be an intriguing game, more of a chess match, I think, this first leg than it might have been previously.
3.0 goals for both Mark and Adrian, about 1.83 currently, and both teams have scored 1.7 for Miguel. We'll go with the guys in the under moments, but it is a cautious bet there because you've given the attacking talent on offer. We'll go to the second game. We'll go to you, Mark, first. We'll take a look at the betting we have at matchbook.com. Be very much the second rate game on Tuesday night, or tonight even, but we will have a look and see the prices here. Benfica 2.34, Inter available at 3.6. The draw is 3.35. Both teams to score yes is 1.97 and no is slightly favoured in the market at 1.92. Inter are getting a quarter of a goal head start at 1.99, and the goal line is 2.5, shaded towards the under. So, Mark, heading into you for this one. Set this game up for us, because obviously we had Inter versus Porto in the last round, and given Benfica and Porto played recently as well, there's a bit of form line to maybe get stuck into on these prices.
There is, yes. So I like Benfica, but I was hoping for a bit more on the price, being a bit greedy, really, because Porto hosted obviously Inter in the second leg in a must-win match. They were 3.15 that day, needing to win, obviously, and should have won, but didn't. And then if you look at the price for Benfica now, around 2.3, that's a decent difference there between the two teams. And actually, if you look at the two teams, Benfica played Porto on Friday night in a bit of a massive match, but probably not so important for Benfica, considering they were 10 points clear at the top of the table going into it anyhow. But they were trading around 2.0 for that game. So the market is saying they were the better team of the two, but not substantially, whereas the difference between 3.15 and a must-win Porto game to 2.2, 2.3 does feel quite chunky, and does feel like you're not getting the full value out of Benfica's price right now. But I still think they are the better team, and I think the word team is most important here, because here we have a Benfica squad just moving in the right direction, moving to Roger Schmidt's beat. They've got a tremendous record in Lisbon so far this season. Obviously, Friday night went against them, but as I say, I don't think all eyes are on that game. I think they're fully focused on this midweek. This is the bigger game. They could afford to lose against Porto and still win the Portuguese Championship with room to spare. Otamendi is suspended, Barr is injured, the right back, so there's going to have to be a bit of a reshuffle in defence, but I still think they've got players of quality there who can come in and do a job. If Grimaldo is missing, the left back, then I would be slightly more concerned, because that's 3 of your first choice back 4, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm assuming he'll be okay. He's been rated just a doubt. But we talk about the team and compare it to Inter. They're not a united group at the minute, and sure, Champions League knockout tie might be able to sort of foster some sort of spirit there, but speculation is really high on Inzaghi's future. He's very unlikely to be there next year. They're unravelling a little bit domestically. 4 defeats in 6, I think it was, before the weekend. Fairly fortunate to pick up a draw in the Coppa Italia away at Juventus last midweek. Lukaku has come back and scored a couple of goals, gives them a bit more of a dimension, but they've been really, really profligate in forward areas and really, really porous in defensive areas too. So, and their record outside of San Siro has been really poor. They've failed to win 9 of 14 away. In Serie A, they've lost 5 of 7 trips to the top half. Their only away clean sheet came at Sampdoria, conceding multiple goals quite regularly. And I know they came through a tough group and they impressed in the counter-attack at Barcelona, but I just thought they were very fortunate to progress against Porto. The first leg was very much, anyone's until the red card, and they managed to very sort of nick a very tight game. But the second leg, how they survived that onslaught in the last half hour, especially in the last 15 minutes, is anyone's guess, really. I don't believe Inter Milan should be in this position. I think they should already be eliminated, and therefore I give Benfica a bit of a chance here. So because I'm being greedy and because I don't really like the Benfica price, I'm just chucking under 3.5 goals in as well to boost it to around 2.86, which is a really nice boost. I do not see this game descending into a shootout, a high-scoring encounter either. So I think if Benfica are to win, you're getting covered by the 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, or the 2-1, and I think they're the most likely correct scores if a home side does come through. So it's a nice boost and makes the price much more palatable.
Okay, that's Benfica to win and under 3.5 goals available in the other markets on matchbook.com. 2.86 currently the price for that. And Miguel, you do like that price on Benfica. I'm guessing you just think they're the better team here against Inter and probably the most likely winner.
Surprisingly high. I do think they're the better team, given for all Mark has said. And also, I'm not saying this means they'll go through, but I think, touching on all that, if it has the feeling this is going to be one of those sort of event games that the Stadium Light can become, and if Benfica are going to play up to that. And I think there'll be an element of kind of a cauldron about it for Inter. I know that's a purely emotional bet, but I mean, it's also based on some of Benfica's form this season, push taken into the Champions League. There's also that sense of momentum at this point of the campaign when when a European run starts to build. I mean, I was about to say there, this could be their last game at the stadium this season in the Champions League. That's possibly not the case, given probably just about favour them overall. But that could be highly dependent on what they do here in this first leg. And I'm going for a Benfica win. I think it's a surprisingly high price, I have to say, given the circumstances. I've not been convinced with Inter all season. I think they're there to be got at, and I think there'll be a kind of a clarity about Benfica at home.
Okay, Mark's gone Benfica on unders, Miguel's Benfica, and Adrian, you're taking the other end of the scale in the unders and under 2.5 goals. It's a safe play, but you're really confident on this selection.
Well, yeah, I would agree that Benfica are favourites, but there's a part of me that thinks that Inter might somehow be able to scramble or grind out some kind of result. This is a pressure game, isn't it, for Benfica? They're not used to being in this kind of situation. Obviously, they did get to the quarters last year where they were knocked out by Liverpool, but being favourites in a Champions League quarter-final is kind of new territory for them, and that with that comes a little bit of pressure. And I do wonder whether they'll be able to play with the kind of freedom and energy and tempo that we've seen throughout the season so far. Hopefully they can, and if they can, they will beat Inter Milan. But there's a lot of experience in the Italian side, and obviously they did get through against Porto, who recently beat Benfica. So that's, even if they were fortuitous, I would agree absolutely with Mark on that. Look, Inter's away form's poor. Winless in their last 6 away from home in all comps, 3 draws, 3 defeats. So I just think there's going to be a strong focus on keeping things very, very tight from an Inter angle, and there'll be an onus on Benfica to score goals. And as I said, maybe they might find that more difficult under pressure as favourites at home in a Champions League quarter-final. So, yeah, my inkling here is that they might nick it, maybe 1-0, but this is going to be a tight game. I'm not as confident as the boys that they will definitely win. I could see a 0-0 or a 1-1 potentially as well. So I'm going to go with unders, under 2.5.
Okay, Miguel's for Benfica, Adrian's under 2.5, Mark's Benfica and under 3.5, which has been pushed out a little bit to 3.0 as well. If you are looking to take that as a podcast selection, I think we'll go with Benfica. I do expect them, and I do think they're most likely winner. 2.36 to selection for Miguel on that one, but all bets from all the guys will be available on Matchbook Insights very quickly after this recording around Tuesday lunchtime. If you're listening after that, we'll move on to third game, Real Madrid versus Chelsea. I'm going to you, Adrian, first on this one. Take a look at the betting we have on Matchbook.com. I'm just so fascinated with what team Frank Lampard picks here, really, to start with. Real Madrid 1.78, Chelsea 5.3. The draw is 3.95. Both teams to score pretty much the same price. Yes, no, 1.94. Yes, no, 1.95. The Asian handicap line sees Chelsea get a 3/4 of a goal head start at 1.95, and the total is 2.5, shaded a good bit towards the under. So yeah, similar to what I asked Miguel in the first match, Adrian, if you can sort of set this game up for us. I mean, it would already be fascinating enough. Only we've got Frank Lampard. Thomas Tuchel took his job and won a Champions League with his team. Can Frank Lampard do the same with Graham Potter's?
Yeah, I don't think so. Is my honest opinion.
We'll clip that out. I mean, so, Ryan,
but I didn't think they'd win it back in 2012 when Roberto Di Matteo was in sort of charge of that team. Yeah, I get why there's that narrative that it could happen, but Real Madrid own the Champions League, don't they? This is where they seem to reserve their best performances, and I've seen quite a lot of Chelsea lately. I worked on their game against Wolves at the weekend, and very unimpressive. Just the one shot on target. No discernible difference really in the way that they went about their play. I mean, they went to a back four. That was a key difference. But the forward players again struggled to really show any kind of cohesion. Reece James was very good, and you know he'll be a threat down that right hand side. But yeah, I just can't see anything other than a Real Madrid victory here. I mean, they've won 8 of their last 9 home games in the Champions League. The defeat did come against Chelsea, so that's something to note with the 3-2 classic. But I think only 3 of the Chelsea players that played in that game, or 3 of the players that played against Wolves rather, featured in that game against Real Madrid. It's a different Chelsea now. And Benzema in good form again. He's got an unbelievable record against English clubs. I think his last 10 goals in the Champions League for Real Madrid have been scored against English teams. So that's a crazy stat, and I would expect him to extend that against Chelsea. Look, Chelsea won't be open They won't be carefree at all here with Frank Lampard at the helm. They might keep things tight, and they don't give that much away. But in terms of open play creativity, Chelsea are below average really in Premier League terms. So I don't know how we expect them to go to the Bernabeu and slice through Real Madrid with ease. They've failed to score, by the way, in 40% of their Premier League matches this season, Chelsea. And based on that, I don't think they're going to score in this match either, if I'm perfectly honest. So yeah, Real Madrid to win. And I'm going safe really with under 4.5 goals. I do think it has potential if Real Madrid cut loose to get a little bit messy, but maybe not 5-0 messy. So under 4.5 feels safe.
Okay, Real Madrid under 4.5 goals, 2.08. And we'll go to you, Mark, on this one. I actually saw a stat just as Adrian touched on Chelsea's goals. I think Leicester City have 11 more goals than Chelsea in the Premier League this season, which is just staggering given that you look at their squad, it's arguably as good as anything in the Premier League.
Yeah, I think Erling Haaland scored more goals than Chelsea as well. Which was,
That's 30, yeah. First 29, yeah.
Well, that's not surprising at all, is it? I mean,
I prefer the Leicester City one myself.
I found this when the draw was made potentially tricky because I thought Chelsea showed in 2 legs against Dortmund that they can raise their game. But since then, Graham Potter's gone, and I don't think there's anything controversial to say. It's a bit of a downgrade to go to Frank Lampard. So I expect Real Madrid to win. I think the price just reflects it's kind of obvious. Madrid are the firm favourites to win this game. Their home defeats this season, the only home defeats have come against Barcelona. Defensively, they've been pretty strong at the Bernabeu as well, and we saw them overcome Liverpool with room to spare. Really, I know the first leg was kind of bizarre, scoring 5 goals from 9 shots, and they could have been out of sight inside the first half hour, Liverpool, but give away a silly error and the game becomes completely different. But Madrid were ruthlessly clinical, very efficient and effective in the second leg then as well. Saw something similar against Barcelona in the Copa del Rey last week, whereas Barcelona dominate the ball, but Real Madrid take their opportunities, and it ends up being a bit of a landslide victory, whereas the balance of the play probably didn't reflect that. But that's Real Madrid for you, and we saw it last year when Chelsea were the better team over 2 legs against Real Madrid. They're in a much better shape going into that game, and still managed to be knocked out by the Los Blancos. And this time around, they're a completely different fish. No permanent boss, an enormous bloated squad without a clear plan or direction. I know there's been sort of sympathy towards Lampard for the weekend's performance because he's not had enough time to work with the players, which again just beggars belief why he would change manager at this time of the season when you're not going anywhere in the league. So anyway, it's a different argument. I think Kante's return could be big. But ultimately, this is a Chelsea side that's failed to be a top half team in the Premier League. So how can you back them to go to Real Madrid and get a result? I think it's very difficult. So I think obviously there were signs that they were moving in the right direction, very small signs in both boxes. Their defensive numbers had improved, their chance creation numbers had improved, but ultimately they have no number 9, no clinical forward to take those opportunities, and that's been a downfall most often in recent weeks. You go back to the 0-0 with Liverpool just last midweek, whereas they were the much better team, failed to make their dominance pay, and that's the opposite of Real Madrid have been doing, not just this season, but it seems throughout Carlo Ancelotti's reign, which is very efficient, effective. And I think if I'm Chelsea, I'm not looking to engage Real Madrid in an all-out action shootout here. I think you've got to be streetwise about things, respect the pace, the ability of Vinicius Junior, Rodrigo, if he starts, it might be Valverde, probably will be Valverde actually, and Benzema as well. And look, Chelsea matches haven't been goal heavy. Only 4 of their domestic games since mid-October have gone over 2.5 goals. So I'd be quite happy to oppose goals in this first leg tie. I think Chelsea can keep it respectable, but ultimately end up on the losing side. So I backed Real Madrid to win and under 3.5 goals, which is 2.52. Now with Matchbook, which again accounts for the 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, or the 2-1.
Okay, and Miguel, slightly different angle, but you do expect Real Madrid to come through this. So you look at the outrights, Miguel, just before you come in. So Real Madrid are 7.6 currently on the Matchup betting exchange, Chelsea 17.0. So kind of gives you an idea where these two teams are favoured in the market.
Yeah, I'd be going. I mean, I agree with everything Mark said, but I think there is a possibility Madrid kill this in the first leg. I just don't have any confidence. I mean, again, I know we shouldn't be influenced too much by the last game, but that happens in the context of Lampard's record at Everton and his record at Chelsea. I think once that started the weekend, he's lost 6 of his last 9 Chelsea, obviously in very different circumstances. But I mean, it is asking a lot to impose any, so even allowing for Kante to come back as well. It's asking a lot to impose some sort of plan for the Bernabeu like this. I don't think he's particularly good anyway as a manager. I have to say, albeit some qualities. But it almost feels like one of the biggest, which is, I mean, and this is something that worked from Everton as well, where he can actually kind of dig into a club's identity, but it already feels like the emotion that is already kind of diluted a bit by what happened at Saturday, which immediately kind of took away all the feel good around Rampart. And also the fact this first leg isn't at home. It might be a bit different. It was first at Stamford Bridge. And on the other side, you've got a Madrid team who suddenly look, I mean, that performance against Barca, especially with the way Benzema suddenly, we're back to March 2022 again. And that's one of the things that I was even thinking as regards City and this side of the draw, where it had looked like everything was going their way. But one caveat beyond Tuchel is also that, well, whatever about Madrid we're doing in January or February, once it comes to the business end, and especially with Benzema, something else can take over, and it looks like that's happening. And I fancy Madrid to win this quite commandingly. So I've gone for Madrid at over 2.5.
Okay, maybe rare pro Real Madrid angles on this podcast, given how last year's knockout stages went throughout, as Mark will tell you plenty. But I think we'll go with the safest option here with Adrian and Real Madrid and under 4.5 goals, 2.08. But it's whatever way you want to do it. 3 different angles from the guys, all pro Real Madrid. We'll go to the final game, Milan versus Napoli, and take a look at the betting that we have on matchbook.com. This is going to be a fascinating game, to be honest, which really looking forward to this. Pretty much a pick 'em. AC Milan are 2.9, Napoli 2.8, slight fabs, draws available at 3.3. Both teams to score, yes, is 1.89, and that's favored in that market versus 1.99. No. The Asian handicap line is effectively a draw no bet market with Napoli shading favoritism at 1.95. The goal line is 2.5, shaded a bit towards the under. So Miguel, like this is such a fascinating game. Obviously Madrid and Chelsea would probably be the main one that on Wednesday night, but Jesus, I'd be tempted to watch this myself just because of so many plots with Serie A. Like,
well, I think it'll be a more competitive game.
Well, yeah, good on that.
I'm going to be at the Bernabeu on Wednesday, and we'll definitely have this screen open on my laptop if I can get it with a geo block. But I mean, again, while so much is obviously built up by Napoli's season or the season of two clubs, it now feels one of those matches completely but conditioned by what happened a week and a half ago, and that's what makes it fascinating. Because I mean, whereas you would have thought everything was building up to Napoli and them maybe being revelation finalists against one of the European giants on the other side, or one of the kind of super wealthy clubs on the other side. Now suddenly Milan, especially given Milan, I mean, we talk about Real Madrid in this regard, but it shouldn't be discounted to Milan, even allowing for the recent history. The second most successful club in the competition. That sort of knowledge, as we've seen repeatedly in the last few seasons of the Champions League, can actually start to influence occasions like this, where, you know, to them, no matter what Napoli have done this season, this competition, Milan feel it's their own, and even allowing for Milan's squad now, that can have an effect. Then on the other side, of course, there's just how ruthlessly and emphatically Milan exposed that flaw we've seen in Spalletti's Napoli all season, but generally they've been too rampaging for it to be an issue. They've put too much, they've made the opposition do too much, but the way they were cut apart for that 4-0, I mean, Spalletti's one of those coaches, you don't expect him really to cater. It's almost like you think he'd double down. But it does all feed into this thing being a complete free-for-all. I think I'll probably still slightly favour Napoli. I thought it was encouraging that they immediately got back with 3 points against Lecce, even though they should have done that. But to actually follow it with a win, no matter how hard fought, no matter how low scoring, after what happened to them the previous week, was crucial. But the only thing I'd say with certainty for this, given how both teams play, I'm going to go for both to score.
Okay, both teams to score of 1.89. And Mark, firstly, were you tempted by that sort of market on the both teams to score, because you've ultimately gone with Napoli effectively drawn up bet here at around 1.89?
No, I was quite happy to sort of ignore the goals markets, because maybe it's a bit too stereotypical of me to say, but this is two Italian teams in a knockout tie who probably didn't expect to be here either. So, yeah, I mean, I have put Napoli +0 in. It's drifted to 1.96. What I would say is I don't bet that yet. If you're interested in Napoli, leave it a little bit, because injury news is unlikely to get any better for Napoli. If anything, it could get worse. We know Osimhen is very unlikely to be involved. I think he was rated 50-50 at the weekend. I think that's being kind. His replacement, Simeone, is also a doubt after picking up an injury at the weekend, and Raspadori as well is a doubt too. So I think all three of them did their own individual training on Monday morning. This game is on Wednesday, though, so the price on Napoli has drifted a little bit in the last 24, 48 hours. It may continue to drift a bit further, so you might be able to get Napoli plus a quarter if you're keen on Napoli getting something out of this game. And I am, despite those injuries. There might be an opportunity for Kvaratskhelia to play as a false nine. He did have a bit of a chance up front on his own at the weekend against Lecce, did okay. But I just wonder whether the 4-0 was perhaps the worst thing to happen for Milan rather than for Napoli coming into this match. Probably playing a bit of amateur psychologist here, but almost there must be some sort of mindset now in the Napoli squad for revenge, to put the record straight, to prove that it was just a flash in the pan. Really, Napoli are top of the league for a reason, and they will want to go there and show it. What's interesting, though, is that the 4-0, it wasn't a fluke. Milan took advantage of the open spaces, counter-attacked superbly, had very little of the ball, but created stacks of big chances. And whether Osimhen was there or not made very little difference. Milan would have won that game anyhow. But there's been an interesting trend between these two teams. The home side hasn't won any of the last 8 meetings, but the last 6 have been won by the away team. So earlier in the season, Napoli won away at Milan, at San Siro, but they weren't actually the better team that day either. Milan were the better side on the eye test, as well as the numbers. If you look at the XG and the shots. So perhaps there's an element of Pioli having Spalletti's number here and being able to conduct some sort of game plan. But as I say, I just think the 4-0 just puts me off Milan actually coming into this game, because there's no surprise factor. There's no shock factor there anyway. And look, they went back to a 4-2-3-1. They played with real intensity, real belief. And they're a team that when all players are on song, are a real menace. But that's not happened often enough for me to be trusting of Milan at the prices even coming into this match. I still think Napoli deserve to be favourites with or without Osimhen. Obviously, you'd rather one of those 3 forwards to be fit and available. I expect one of them to be. But I just think if you are going to be pro-Napoli, as I am here, I probably have not made the best case for them. I'd just be willing to wait 24 hours to see where we're at, possibly on Wednesday morning, going into the game and seeing what the team news is like. Probably betting with a bit more of an idea of team sheets, because I still think they are the strongest suit. I still think they're very capable of going there and getting something. But if you can get plus a quarter, obviously getting paid half stakes if the game ends all square. And I wouldn't be too surprised if it does play out to be quite a tentative, close-knit game without a huge amount of goals. But Miguel's made a decent case for them. So yeah, I'm pro-Napoli, and I will be with or without Osimhen.
Okay, maybe you just wait before kickoff around Wednesday morning, and particularly in the match pro betting exchange, those markets will get very liquid on the Asian handicap line. You may get Napoli plus a quarter of a goal if some injury news doesn't go their way. Adrian, no bet for you, but it's a fascinating. You know what it reminded me of, right? And Mark won't be too happy with this. 2004 Champions League quarterfinal, Chelsea versus Arsenal, and Milan are obviously Chelsea and Napoli are Arsenal. And it just has that feeling for me that maybe Milan might just get them over 2 legs, even though Arsenal were a far better team than Chelsea in 2004 and should have won that Champions League that season.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from. I just can't. I have to leave this one alone because there are so many contradictions. Napoli free flowing, attack minded, but then Milan don't give much away at home. 7 clean sheets out of 10 at the San Siro. The 4-0. I'm kind of in agreement with Mark. The 4-0 from Milan in Naples will surely make Napoli be extra determined, but also a little bit more cautious. So I was looking at both teams to score no market, which would go against what I wanted to go with, which would have been goals like Miguel. So yeah, there are lots of different things here. The away record I was looking at, very, very strong. So there you think about Napoli, but then I too checked out the XG, and you can see that over the 2 matches this season in Serie A, Milan are way ahead of Napoli in the expected goals in both matches. So you think, well, they are able to create chances against this Napoli team. They know how to do it, which would again point towards goals. So do you know what? I'm just going to leave it alone. I think Napoli will go through, but I'm not confident. Not as confident as I would be if they were playing maybe overseas opposition. I think the fact that it's all Italian gives Milan a shot at this, a little bit like it did with Chelsea against Arsenal those years ago.
Yeah, we'll lock in a no bet as for the podcast in general. Mark and Miguel's again will be available on Matchbook Insights if you do want to check that out. And a shout out obviously to Mark for those that haven't been listening to the podcast throughout the season. He gave Napoli a good shout out at around 151.0, widely available across the board throughout when we were recording that as well, which is phenomenal. But the draw has gone their way. They could do it, but they may get unstuck against AC Milan. We'll go to the long shot section here. As I mentioned, bet recap, insights.matchbook.com. And if you are listening on the podcast or YouTube, if you head over to our YouTube channel, subscribe for free and hit that like button, it'll be much appreciated by all on the Matchbook team. Long shots, all gone for correct scores here. Invariably, Matchbook will be best price on all correct scores on the odds checker grid for the couple of days leading up to these games. So well worth checking that out. Mark, go back to you on this one. Benfica versus Inter. It's 1-0 Benfica for you.
Yeah, 7-1, 8.0. Just go back to the Inter Porto tie. It was 0-0 until the last sort of 10 minutes in the first leg. A red card tipped the balance to Inter. They managed to score a goal and win the tie, and then the return was 0-0, but very easily could have been 1-0 Porto. And I think Porto had their opportunities at San Siro to get a lead themselves in the first leg. So expecting something similar here. There's not a huge amount of difference between Benfica and Porto. Obviously, very much a very big difference in terms of how they approach games and their organisation under different coaches. But I think they're good enough to get a result. And if they do, I think it'll be by narrow margins. So you can get back the 4.7 on Benfica to win and under 2.5 goals, which gets 1-0 or 2-0 onside, or you can be a bit more ballsy and back the 7-1 on the 1-0 home win.
Okay, that's currently 8.0, as I mentioned. May get a touch bigger as well near kickoff when proper liquidity gets into the market late on. Adrian, Manchester City 1, Bayern Munich 1. I want to give a quick shout out to United Everton. It just felt like a 1-0 game watching that for 90 minutes. I think you're a little bit unfortunate that didn't land last weekend.
Yeah, that was Miguel? Was that Miguel?
Mine,
yeah,
Miguel.
Apologies, Miguel. There you
go.
Yeah,
he hit the post there. Very unlucky.
Yeah.
Now we've already talked about why we think that there'll be under 3 goals in the game between Manchester City and Bayern. A little bit of a chess match. Tuchel obviously hasn't seen his team breached against Manchester City, or he didn't when he was in charge of Chelsea. Can I see him extending that run to 4? Not really. Not given how well Manchester City are playing. They're in outstanding form at the moment. And I think that they're easily good enough, obviously, to score in the game. But I think Tuchel's Bayern can limit them to just the 1. And I'll go with my same line really for Manchester City in any top level Champions League match. I expect them to concede. I don't think that their defence is special. I don't think it's entirely been fixed down the years, and this is where they've come undone, hasn't it? They've not kept enough clean sheets at the business end of the Champions League against elite opposition, and I've just got a feeling that Bayern Munich have certainly got the quality and the talent to prize them open once in this game. I don't think they're gonna go at City. I don't think this is going to be end to end, but I do think they're capable of picking them off if an opportunity arises. So yeah, 1 apiece is the score that's very much in my head, and the price is quite good, 9.2.
9.2 there. Manchester City 1, Bayern Munich 1. Can you imagine the hype going into the second leg if it is 1-1? Next week's game is going to be fascinating couple of weeks here in the Champions League. And Miguel, well done. Well, not well done, but unlucky with the Manchester United 1, Everton 0 scoreline here. You're going for your pro Frank Lampard getting hammered here in the Real Madrid 3, Chelsea 0. So make the case briefly.
Or strain hammering, and it makes this all this decision all the surprising what Mark said about the Dortmund game, and that I actually did feel it could have been one of those classic seasons where whatever was happening Chelsea in the league, they were able to raise it in Europe, and it felt like Potter might have fell into that a little bit, given they were much better against Dortmund and kind of looked like more what he wanted, and Europe can have that effect, but we've also seen Europe can have that effect on Real Madrid, and I just think given how sure Madrid are themselves, how we don't really know even what Lampard's team is going to be, whether there's a connection with the squad, what idea he has in terms of setting up. And I can just see Madrid picking them open, as I say, try to get the job done first leg. I was actually almost thinking 3-0 is a little bit conservative, but people might play that clip back to me as Lampard pulls off a style response. But for me, all logic at the moment suggests, a 3-0 win.
Yeah, producer Ryan has a lot of clipping out to do to try and catch you lads out. Definitely, I think Mark said a few things as well. I'm like, right, we'll clip that just in case it doesn't happen. We'll move on to the podcast best bets here. And Mark, we'll actually go back to you just because there's been a last minute change. I want all the viewers and listeners to be aware you have changed your nap here. And is that based on what the lads have said? Just a bit of excitement and getting yeah.
A little bit. I mean, I love listening to Miguel and how ballsy he is about Real Madrid absolutely wiping the floor of Chelsea. I'm a bit more reserved. I think Chelsea can be a little bit more restrained. I think that midfield that they have to offer is potentially as good as any midfield in the competition if they play to their potential. But that's the big question mark about Chelsea. So my full disclosure, my bet was Real Madrid to win and under 3.5 goals at around about 2.5. But I just thought, why not, add extra stress by including the goals angle? Just back Real Madrid to win at 1.78. It's not the worst price in the world. It's absolutely palatable and backable at that price. So, I'll just back Real Madrid to win the game. I don't really care what the score is and how many goals there is in the game. I think we're all probably in agreement that Real Madrid should win that game. And if they don't, it would be a bit of a surprise. So, in that sense, 1.78 isn't the worst price. So, I'll just put that up.
Okay, Adrian, you are going to lock it in with the under 4.5 goals at 2.08.
Yeah, look, I think they're difficult games to call. Obviously, I've chosen to step aside from the Napoli-Milan game. Man City Bayern is just fascinating. Even the Benfica, even though we're leaning towards Benfica, I can't make it the best bet to go unders there. This is ahead of kickoff. This is the match that I see the clearest in terms of what should happen. And that is that Chelsea shouldn't be able to contain Real Madrid. As I said, they've struggled for goals massively this season. I think in the Premier League, 19 goals scored from open play, which is just dreadful, really, across the campaign. Failed to score in 40% of their games. Interestingly, Real Madrid have scored in 30 consecutive home knockout games in the Champions League. So you have to expect them to score at least once here. And do you know what? If they score one, I think it will be enough because I don't see Lampard's Chelsea troubling them. I think Potter would have given them a better chance actually over the two legs of progressing. So no, Real Madrid and unders. I'll go with that one.
Okay, 2.08 Real Madrid on under 4.5 goals. And Miguel, the final word to you for your best bet. It's Milan and Napoli, and you're expecting goals in this game.
Yeah, I do take Mark's point and kind of whether the Italian influence can take over in games this type. I just think the way these teams are tactically conditioned will work against that, with that also influenced by what happened a week and a half ago. I'm going to go for over 2.5. I think this could be a 2-1 either way, or even 3-1.
Okay, over 2.5 goals, 2.26 currently Milan and Napoli, and all these bets we've threw a lot at you there. Insights.matchbook.com. It's a busy time of year. We'll be back with our Premier League podcast on Thursday. Monday, it's the second legs of these quarterfinals. I just can't see how 2 or 3 of these ties are not just poised perfectly heading into those second legs. But my thanks as always to Mark O'Hare, Adrian Clarke, and Miguel Delaney. We'll speak to you again on Thursday. Looking forward to the weekend's action. Until then, enjoy the Champions League football. Take care, and we'll chat to you then. Bye-bye.